Here are the top stories for today, June 15, 2021. No further relaxation. Metro Manila and 4 neighboring provinces remain under general community quarantine. More areas are under modified ECQ due to a surge in COVID-19 cases. Police officers under the A4 priority list get vaccinated for COVID-19. The country's top cop is the first to get the jab, along with 500 cops in Camp Crame. No exceptions. President Rodrigo Duterte says the province of Cebu must abide by the national government's quarantine protocols for arriving passengers. And no abrogation yet. The suspension of the termination of the Philippines Visiting Forces Agreement with the United States is extended for another 6 months as the government weighs the pros and cons of the military pact. Good day, I am William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. President Rodrigo Duterte announced the new quarantine status in the country effective tomorrow, June 16. During his talk to the people last night, the president placed the National Capital Region Plus composed of Metro Manila, Bulacan, Rizal, Laguna, and Cavite under General Community Quarantine or GCQ until the end of June. However, Metro Manila and Bulacan is under GCQ with some restrictions. Also placed under GCQ are Baguio City, Kalinga, Mountain Province, Abra, Benguet, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, Batangas, Quezon, Iligan City, Davao, General Santos City, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, Cotabato, South Cotabato, and Lanao del Sur, Cotabato City. Meanwhile, 9 cities and 12 provinces are placed under the stricter Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine or MECQ. These are Santiago City, Cagayan, Apayao, Ifugao, Bataan, Lucena City, Puerto Princesa, Naga City, Iloilo City, Iloilo, Negros Oriental, Zamboanga City, Zamboanga Sibugay, Zamboanga del Sur, Zamboanga del Norte, Cagayan de Oro City, Davao City, Butuan City, Agusan del Sur, Dinagat Islands, and Surigao del Sur. The rest of the country will be under the Modified General Community Quarantine. Under MECQ, outdoor dining is allowed to have 50% capacity, but indoor dining can accommodate only up to 10% of the capacity. Outdoor sports venues are allowed to have 50% capacity. Personal care like beauty salons and barber shops, nail spas are up to 30% capacity. Meanwhile, under ordinary GCQ, indoor tourist attractions, indoor and outdoor sports venues, indoor and outdoor tourist attractions, libraries, museums, venues for meetings and conferences, and personal care services are allowed to operate up to 50% capacity. Indoor dining is allowed up to 50% under ordinary GCQ, but only 30% in GCQ areas with heightened restrictions. Religious gatherings under GCQ will remain up to 30%, but local government units can increase it up to 50%. The Philippines has administered nearly 7 million doses of vaccines against COVID-19. National Task Force Against COVID-19 Deputy Chief Implementer Vivencio Dizon said weekly vaccine administration has reached 1 million doses for 3 consecutive weeks. Government data show that the country has given 6,948,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines as of yesterday morning. Of the total administered vaccines, over 2.4 million were given to healthcare workers, over 2.2 million doses to senior citizens, 2.15 million for individuals with comorbidities, and nearly 160,000 for the economic frontliners. Dizon said the government targets to inoculate 500,000 doses a day once vaccine supply stabilizes this month. Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said there is an increasing demand for Sinovac vaccines in the country. Sinovac is the latest vaccine to receive emergency use authorization from the World Health Organization or WHO.
We have some survey that the public demand for Sinovac also greatly increased. Yung mga LGU tumatawag po sa amin ni Senator Bongo, Actually, ang talagang hinahanap nila yung mas madaling ma-deploy kasi madalian po ang ginagawa po natin because we are racing against time.
Meanwhile, the government allocates Pfizer jabs to local government units with proven capability to handle the vaccines. This as Pfizer requires storage with negative 70 to 80 degrees Celsius. Testing czar Secretary Vince Dizon said the Pfizer vaccines will most likely be given to Metro Manila, Cebu, and Davao. Since the 2.2 million Pfizer vaccine doses were donations from COVAX, Dizon said it will follow the WHO prioritization. The jabs will be given to healthcare workers, elderlies, individuals with comorbidities, and indigent populations. The Philippine National Police, or PNP, rolled out its vaccine drive for its members who belong to the A4 category. PNP Chief General Guillermo Eleazar led the symbolic vaccination at the PNP headquarters in Camp Crame. Also present during the event were Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque, officials from the Department of Health, and other members of the PNP Command Group. DOH Assistant Secretary Maria Francia Laksamana personally administered the COVID-19 vaccine to Eleazar. Other officials who also took the jabs were PNP Deputy Chief for Administration Police Lieutenant General Joselita Veracruz, PNP Deputy Chief for Operations Police Lieutenant General Ephraim Dixon, and former PNP spokesperson and now Director of the PNP Training Service, Brigadier General Bernard Banac. The national government has allocated 28,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines for police personnel in the NCR. Eleazar said they are still waiting for the allocated jobs for their members who are outside the NCR. He also thanked President Rodrigo Duterte for their inclusion in the A4 priority group. Organizers of community pantries and other food distribution activities are reminded anew to comply with COVID-19 health protocols to prevent the further transmission of the disease. During his Talk to the People address, President Rodrigo Duterte said that while he lauds the people behind these initiatives, they must strictly follow the health protocols. The president cited the food distribution in Barangay Matandang Balara, Quezon City, where 86 persons tested positive after going to the said event.
Saludo ako at maganda yung konsensya ninyo sa kapwa-tao ninyo. But please, read the restriction first. Maggawa ng pantry service to the people. See to it that the regulations are complied with. Kaya kung talagang magka-crowding yan, super spreader yan. Mag-i-spread na naman. Wala nang katapusan.
Meanwhile, the president has ordered the arrest of travelers who present fake negative COVID-19 test results. On June 9, 4 more tourists bound for Boracay Island in Malay, Aklan were caught with counterfeit coronavirus tests and QR codes at Tabon Port in Caticlan.
It's come to my attention that some travelers arriving in various parts of the country, most notably in Boracay, are presenting fake COVID-19 tests. Huwag ho ninyong gawin yan at makukumpuriswa lang kayo. Hindi lang man, pati yung gastos ninyo. Kindly check at least twice over whether or not you have the genuine certificates. I am also directing the Department of Tourism, the Philippine National Police, and all local government to arrest those presenting fake tests and enforce strict compliance on protocols of local tourism. Do not be afraid to file sanctions.
San Carlos City in Pangasinan and the Soxargen region ramps up its vaccination drive in their localities. Meanwhile, Bacolod reports it has already inoculated more residents. The details from Benjamin Dong.
In Bacolod City, more than 42,000 residents were inoculated from March 5 to June 11. Of the number, 32,538 have availed of the first dose, while 9,635 got their second dose. Mayor Evelio Leonardia said vaccine czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. assured them of enough supply to inoculate 100% of their adult population. In San Carlos City, Pangasinan, its first mall-based COVID-19 vaccination site was launched in partnership with the City Mall. Residents of San Carlos City may now register for the vaccination program at the mall. Meanwhile, the Department of Health in Region 12 has stepped up its preparations for the inoculation of those belonging to the A4 priority group. Registration is being done through barangay health stations, human resources officers, and assigned coordinators. Local health officials said they are still waiting for the allotment of vaccines and the final advisory from the Department of Health Central Office regarding the expansion of the vaccination coverage. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Bench Bondok.
Still to come, and it's final. The national government's arriving protocols applies to all as it calls on Cebu to abide by this policy. And 2 provinces in eastern Visayas suspend anew the entry of locally stranded individuals. Details ahead. This is the PNA Newsroom. The COVID-19 pandemic has greatly changed our lives for the worse. Lives and jobs were lost and economies reached a meltdown. Thanks to the arrival of safe and effective vaccines, we are one step closer to normalcy. It's time to do our part, get vaccinated for our safety and for our recovery.
You are there in that community, go there and have yourself vaccinated by any of the vaccines available. They are all potent, they are all effective. I would like to appeal to all our kababayans, please get vaccinated against COVID-19 and be the government partner in preventing further spread of the disease. I encourage you to get vaccinated as soon as possible time. These vaccines are safe and they are the key to reopening our society. The need for international solidarity and cooperation cannot be made clearer than this pandemic because everyone is safe. No one is safe globally until everybody is safe.
Vaccines work. President Rodrigo Duterte said Cebu province must abide by the arrival protocols of the IATF EID. Cebu earlier implemented a different set of protocols for returning Filipinos, which include 2 RT-PCR tests within a week and a strict home quarantine. Because of this, Malacanang ordered all international flights to be diverted from Mactan Cebu International Airport in Cebu to the Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Pasay City. The order expired on June 12. The existing IATF EID rules mandate all arriving passengers, including those who have been vaccinated against COVID-19, to stay in a quarantine facility for 10 days and observe home quarantine for another 4 days. Incoming travelers are also required to take an RT-PCR on the 7th day of their quarantine. The Regional Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases has suspended the return of locally stranded individuals to the province of Biliran and Southern Leyte. The 2 provinces requested for a moratorium due to increasing cases of COVID-19 that has crowded their quarantine facilities. The 14-day moratorium started on June 9. The travel suspension applies to all LSIs but is not applicable to those who are already in transit at the time of the issuance of the resolution. Authorized persons outside their residence are also not covered by the moratorium, including repatriated or returning overseas Filipino workers who have completed their 14-day mandatory quarantine. The moratorium also does not cover LSIs who are in transit to other local government units. Both provinces are now under general community quarantine from modified GCQ. President Rodrigo Duterte has suspended the abrogation of the Visiting Forces Agreement between the Philippines and the United States for another 6 months. Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said the chief executive cited concerns regarding particular aspects of this agreement. The Department of Foreign Affairs, however, said it is still waiting for guidance on the specific areas the president would like to look more closely into. Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, meanwhile, welcomed the suspension, saying the Philippines will get 6 more months to review the advantages and disadvantages of having a VFA. The VFA lays out the terms and conditions on the entry and visit of U.S. military troops to the Philippines. In February 2020, President Duterte notified Washington that Manila is formally terminating the pact. This is the 3rd time that Duterte extended the suspension, the first of which was in June 2020 and the second in November 2020. Meanwhile, the United States government welcomed the decision of President Duterte to postpone the termination of the Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA. The U.S. Embassy in Manila said their alliance continues to contribute not only to the security of the two countries, but also strengthens the rules-based order that benefits all nations in the Indo-Pacific. Following the coronavirus outbreak, the government in June 2020 suspended the abrogation for 6 months. It was postponed for the second time in November 2020 to allow both nations to find a more enhanced, mutually beneficial and lasting arrangement on how to move forward in mutual defense. A total of 10,000 jobs will be created by the 38-kilometer Philippine National Railway's Clark Phase 1 project once it is fully operational. Transportation Secretary Arthur Tugade said around 7,500 jobs have so far been created during the construction of the project. He said he directed the Department of Transportation and the project's contractors to give job priority to former overseas Filipino workers, public utility vehicle drivers, and conductors whose jobs are affected by the pandemic. The statement came after Tugade's inspection of the PNR Balagtas and Kalugpit stations of the PNR Clark Phase 1, where he announced that the project is now 46.6% complete. Tugade also assured that the PNR project is on track as construction is expected to be completed by the second quarter of 2024. Tugade cited the application of the span-to-span method in the construction of a 14-kilometer-long viaduct with 3 of the stations, namely Balagtas, Giginto, and Malolos. The future PNR railway will sit on top of the elevated concrete section. The PNR Clark Phase 1 will have 10 stations that will cut across the cities of Manila, Caloocan, Valenzuela, and the municipalities of Meycauayan, Marilao, Bukawe, Balagtas, Giginto, and Malolos City. Once completed, the train service is expected to serve 300,000 passengers every day and will reduce travel time between Malolos and Tutuban from 1 hour and 30 minutes to only 35 minutes. The second phase of the new Diversion Road project that will connect Tarlac City to New Clark City and Capas Tarlac is now underway. The Diversion Road that will bypass the 24.1-kilometer Manila North Road would provide motorists with a smooth, safer, and quicker travel to and from Tarlac City. The road concreting, widening, and rehabilitation of Tarlac City Southwest Diversion Road is expected to be completed in 2022. The unpaved Tibag-Armenia via Tibagan-Balanti Diversion Road is being improved to serve as an alternate road to New Clark City and Tarlac City to nearby provinces. The bypass road starts at the Tarlac City-San Jose via Tibag-Burgos Road and ends at the Capas-San Jose-Mayantoc-Malacampa Road. Santos said the project's first phase, funded under the General Appropriations Act of 2020, is already complete. Meanwhile, the Diversion Road second phase is at least 30% completed. Up next, a shocking revelation on the death of FEU athlete Keith Absalon. And the COVAX facility welcomes the commitment of the G7 countries to share COVID-19 vaccines. Back after a quick break, stay with the PNA Newsroom. You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. FEU football star Keith Absalon and his cousin Novin were laid to rest a week after they were killed in a mine blast perpetrated by the New People's Army in Masbate. However, it seems there is more than what meets the eye as to the truth behind the death of the 21-year-old athlete. In a press briefing of the National Task Force Against Local Communist Armed Conflict or NTF-LCAC, PCOO Undersecretary Lorraine Badoy said witnesses saw Absalon was shot at close range by the communist terrorist despite his pleas to be spared. This was also based on pictures and an autopsy report saying a bullet hit Absalon's right eye. Southern Luzon Command Chief Lieutenant General Antonio Parlades said this act has been perpetrated by the NPA because many of their members are now returning to the folds of the law.
Ang laman nito talagang very lethal. Ang composition niya according to the EOD na binigyan natin ng tasking na aralin kung anong itong ginagamit nila. Mga metal, mga kabilya, pinutol-putol na pako. And then they're using ammonium nitrate as yung pang-blast. And then of course they mix this with fuel oil.
Meanwhile, Senator Risa Ontiveros wants those behind the heinous crime punished, especially now that the NPA has admitted responsibility for the said attack. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon rejected anew calls for the revival of peace talks between the government and the communist terrorist group.
What peace talks are they talking about? They want to get it, blackmail us, and probably plant more. Ang dami-dami nilang ginagawang landmines. Ibig nilang sabihin, dapat tayong matakot dyan. Makipag-peace talks na lang tayo. Ay talagang peace off tayo. Napi-peace off tayo sa peace talks nila. So, no peace talks, sabi nga ng Pangulo.
The Philippine Statistics Authority is eyeing 100,000 registrants daily for the Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys, as the registration process continues to stabilize. PSA Chief and National Statistician Undersecretary Claire Dennis Mapa announced that more than 12 million Filipinos have already finished Step 2 or biometrics registration. He also confirmed that the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has printed 500,000 Philippine identification cards with at least 75,000 already delivered by the Philippine Post free of charge. Meantime, the PSA reminded government agencies and the private sector anew to recognize the PhilID as a valid proof of identity in transactions. Experts in Brazil have reported the continued regression of the country's economy as COVID-19 related deaths inch toward 500,000 amid delays in immunization efforts. More on this and other news overseas from Chris Mundo.
As Brazil approaches the 500,000 mark of deaths by COVID-19, Brazilians still face a slow situation regarding vaccination, with just over 11% of the population fully immunized. The Ministry of Health announced on Monday that the receipt of 3 million doses of Janssen's vaccine has been postponed, which further extends the expectations of vaccinating Brazilians. The continuing effects of COVID-19 has since brought down the average income regressed to 1,122 Brazilian real, the lowest level since 2012, while income inequality reached 0.674, the highest since 2012. Meanwhile, partners for the COVAX initiative on Sunday welcomed the commitment by G7 countries to share at least 870 million doses in support of equitable access to vaccines in 2021 and 2022. At its meeting in Cornwall, UK, which ended Sunday, the G7 announced its pledge with the goal of delivering at least half of them by the end of the year. However, World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said more doses are needed with faster delivery. The WHO cited the continuing surge of COVID-19 cases in other countries that still have little to no access to vaccines, unlike larger nations. So far, the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 infection worldwide has surpassed 175 million, increasing by more than 387,000 over the past 24 hours. According to the data of the WHO published on Sunday, the number of fatalities has increased by more than 10,100 over 24 hours, surpassing 3.79 million. The mark of 150 million infections worldwide was surpassed on April 30. The majority of the infections were recorded in the US with 33 million, followed by India at 29.4 million and Brazil with 17.2 million. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
And in sports, Southeast Asian Games silver medalist Nino Surban won the men's elite gold in the national trials for mountain bikes of the Integrated Cycling Federation of the Philippines in Danao City over the weekend. Surban cleared a 6-lap course over the hills of Sitio Bugho in Barangay Sandayong Sur in 1 hour, 22 minutes and 11 seconds to take the win. Surban captured a silver in the men's cross-country event during the 2019 SEA Games in Tagaytay. In the women's side, Ariana Dormitorio won the gold after crossing the finish line at 1 hour, 29 minutes and 50.7 seconds. Meanwhile, Garth Gerlan and Athena Magpantay captured the 15 to 16 age group titles. The other age group winners were Julius Rafael Cabatingin at 11 to 12 and John Andre Labuga at 13 to 14. The national trials were the first cycling races that took place amid the pandemic, the first since the completion of the 2020 Ronda Pilipina season. Participating in the 2022 elections is now just a few clicks away as the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, formally launched on Tuesday a mobile app for easier voter registration. The mobile registration form app is a downloadable application package that can be shared offline from one Android smartphone to another. Once installed, users may apply for voter registration without the need for internet connectivity. A QR code will be generated upon the successful accomplishment of the required form. Users will then present the QR code along with a valid ID at a local COMELEC office to have their biometrics taken. The mobile app is being implemented in more than 500 cities and municipalities nationwide, including National Capital Region, Cebu City, and Davao City. For any questions or clarifications about the mobile app, contact the COMELEC's Voter Care Center hotlines on mobile, Facebook, and Twitter. Here is another look at today's biggest stories. No further relaxation. Metro Manila and 4 neighboring provinces remain under general community quarantine. More areas are under modified ECQ due to a surge in COVID-19 cases. Police officers under the A4 priority list get vaccinated for COVID-19. The country's top cop is the first to get the jab, along with 500 cops in Camp Crame. No exceptions. President Rodrigo Duterte says the province of Cebu must abide by the national government's quarantine protocols for arriving passengers. And no abrogation yet. The suspension of the termination of the Philippines Visiting Forces Agreement with the United States is extended for another 6 months as the government weighs the pros and cons of the military pact. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, check our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day. Stay safe, everyone.